Hello, and this is your Geometry Do Now 29.2 video key. And once again, we're previewing/reviewing some concepts from last year and coming up for Chapter 9. And in fact, these do nows, if you're doing a solid job of it, will suffice to take care of Chapter 9, Section 1. So here we go. Let's work this out. No calculators at all, please. And let's deal with this first set of questions. So we got x squared plus 16. So I'll start with A. We got x squared plus 16 equals 25. Well, the first thing to do is start isolating our variable. So we're going to subtract 16 from both sides, and we will end up with x squared equals 25 minus 16, which will equal 9. So now x squared will equal 9. So what we want to do is get the square root of both sides of that. So square root of x squared will equal the square root of 9. Now, that's an interesting way to spell the shorthand for square root. At any rate, there we go. So the square root of x squared is just x. And the square root of 9 is plus 3 and minus 3. And I'll remind you that you can write that as plus/minus 3. That is saying two different numbers, 3 and negative 3. Okay, so that's that one. So the big idea is we're getting it so that the square is isolated, and then you get the square root of both sides, because a square root is the inverse of a square, just like addition is the inverse of subtraction and division is the inverse of multiplication. You have to be able to sort that out nicely. Now let's take a look at C. And you might be thinking, oh, maybe B, D, and F are the ones you'll have on your exit ticket. And if you're thinking that, you'd be right. So now we're going to take 12 squared plus x squared equals 13 squared. And we're going to isolate x squared. So we're going to subtract 12 squared from both sides. So x squared will now equal 13 squared minus 12 squared. And you're going to have to work out what is 13 squared and what is 12 squared. Well, 13 squared is 169, and 12 squared is 144. And when we subtract 144 from 169, we get 25. And so x squared equals 25. Then we get the square root of both sides. And I think you're probably already thinking 5 and negative 5, but let's do it. Square root of 25. And so that's going to be, of course, this x will equal plus or minus 5. Once again, that's saying 5 and negative 5. I'm going to scroll down just a hair so we can see what's going on. This next one is an interesting one. Let's see what's going on here. So E. All right, so remember I said the square root of a square they cancel each other out. Well, here we're squaring a square root, so that'll cancel out as well. So we've got x squared equals the stuff in parentheses here. This one here is in parentheses, and this one here is in parentheses. And if it's unclear, they are being added. Okay, I apologize that the quality of the scan is a little fuzzy there. But okay, what is the square of the square root of 5? Well, the square of the square root of 5 is just 5. And what's the square of the square root of 11? Well, that's the square root of 11 times the square root of 11, which is 11. So that all equals x squared. So I'm going to just reverse this. So I'm going to say x squared equals 5 plus 11, which is 16. So we get the square root of both sides. So square root of x squared equals the square root of 16, and so x will equal plus or minus 4. Let's take a look at these. Now these definitely get into some quadratics here. So we'll need to think about the tools we had way back in the Wayback Machine with quadratics. And I know that that unit was somewhat disrupted by the apocalypse and all. So your learning of it and memory of it may be fuzzy. So the first thing we want to remind ourselves, is something called the zero product property. So notice that this equals 0, and we could rearrange this So it becomes x squared minus 9x minus 36 equals 0. So that's the first name of the game. We want to get these all equal to 0. If they're not, these are already set up that way. Now, since it equals 0, if we could factor these, if we could turn this quadratic into two linear factors, then we could figure out what would make either one of those linear factors 0, because anything times 0 equals 0. So what we want to do is we want to turn these into factors. And the good news is that all quadratic equations are the product of two linear factors. Some of them are really messy linear factors. Some of them involve the square root of -1, but not these. These will be fairly straightforward. So what we need to do is we need to factor it. So I'm going to remind you of a tool that you may remember. We need to find two factors of -6 that add up to -5. So here's the tool. It's the big X. So I'm going to put a multiplication dot here, and we're trying to find out what two factors of -6 add up to -5. Okay. Well, the factors of -6 are going to be negative and positive. Okay. So what two factors of -6 would add up to -5? Well, -6 times +1 gets us -6. And -6 plus +1 gets us -5. And then we can just go ahead and do this. We can put this here and put this here and put parentheses around this. And now we have actually created two linear factors for x squared minus 5x minus 6. So I'll go ahead and write that down. So first of all, we factor. Okay, and so we get x squared minus 5x minus 6 is x minus 6 times x plus 1, and that equals 0. All right, now we got to figure out what x value would make x minus 6 equal to 0. Well, if x was 6, that would work. What x value would make x plus 1 0? -1 would work, because -1 plus 1 is 0. So there you go, and -1. So so that is what x is. So x equals 6 and -1. All right, now we're going to take a look at C. Oh, what happened to B? Oh, B is on the exit ticket. So good to make sure we have a good review on this. So let's deal with this next one. I'm going to erase some stuff in here. Okay, and we're going to put numbers into this one as well. All right, now let's take a look. We need two factors of 15 that add up to -8. That's a -8. You may be thinking, well, how the heck am I going to get factors of a positive number that add up to a negative number? Well, a negative times a negative will equal a positive, so we can get two negative factors. So think about what factors of 15 would add up to 8, and you'll have it pretty much. They'll both be negative. Okay, and the factors of 15 that add up to +8 are 3 and 5. So we'll use -3 and -5. Okay, and we can just set this all up. X minus 5 times x minus 3. Okay, and I don't have room to put that last parenthesis, so I'm just going to have to pretend it's there. All right, so factor first. Okay, and now we're going to have x minus 5 times x minus 3 equals 0. That's just an equivalent expression for x squared minus 8x plus 15. If we multiplied that out, -5 times -3 would be 15. X times x would be x squared, and then we would multiply x times -3 to -3x, and -5 times x, which will be -5x. Put those together, you'll get -8x. So now you got to figure out what x value would make either one of these factors 0. Because if you turn this factor into 0, it doesn't matter what this factor is. The whole thing will equal 0. Same dang thing with x minus 3. So x could be 5 to make this equal 0, and also 3. Remember, I told you there'd be 2 answers. All right, last one. Last one throws a slight curveball because it's not already organized in the format that we've been working with. I'm going to go ahead and erase this stuff here because I'm going to need to do it again a little lower on my screen. Okay, scroll down a little bit. And we're dealing with x squared minus 36 equals 9x. Now, x squared minus 36, we could factor that. That'd be x plus 6 and x times x minus 6. But that wouldn't help us much because then that equals 9x. What we really need to do is we need to move this 9x over. To do that, we need to subtract 9x from both sides. So move all terms to the left. So subtract 9x. You can't just move it. You have to subtract it. Subtract 9x from both sides. You make the right side equal to 0 is what we're doing. So it becomes x squared. And then that'll be minus 9x. And that will be minus 36. Okay, let's take a look what happens. Let's go over here, and I'll use blue this time. And I need 2 factors of negative 36 that add up to 9. So the product has to be negative 36, and the sum has to be negative 9. So one of the factors will be negative, the other one will be positive. So let's work it out. So 2 factors of 36 that are 9 apart from each other, essentially. So let's see. That plus isn't supposed to be there. Hang on. Floop, it's gone now. Okay, so factors of 36, of negative 36, or just factors of 36 that are 9 apart would be 12 and 3. And since our sum has to be negative, 12 has to be the negative number because we need something farther from 0. So 12 and 3 will do the job. So x plus 3 and x minus 12. And there you have it. So we now have our factors. So we factored it. So factor this. We end up with x minus 12 times x plus 3, and that equals 0. I should have made a note that this now equals 0. Sorry about that. And now x will equal 12 because 12 minus 12 would be 0, which makes the whole thing 0. And negative 3 because negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And then you're multiplying times 0. And you are good to go. I hope that helped.